In 2021, in Russia, according to statistics, the Ford Transit became the second most popular LCV, that is, a light truck, yielding in terms of the number of copies sold only to the traditional leader of the local market, the Gazelle light truck. The success of the Ford Transit is largely due to the fact that this light truck was not imported into Russia, but by the manufacturer on its territory, and this production grew uncontrollably. For example, in 2021, 21,000 Ford Transits were manufactured in Russia against 14,000 in 2020. Unfortunately, after the introduction of international sanctions against Russia in early 2022, the continuation of the production of Ford Transit in Russia became impossible. But this project was so successful, and the history of its implementation is so interesting that I will tell about it here, thus putting an end to the history of the long-term production of Ford Transit in Russia. This project has become one of the brightest and most successful among all Russian-American projects. First, a little historical background. The history of the production of Ford Transit light trucks in Russia dates back to 2011, when the Russian company Solars and the international auto concern Ford Motors signed an agreement to establish a joint venture, Ford Solars. Among the cars produced by him was the 7th generation Ford Transit. Its assembly production was launched in the Russian Republic of Tatarstan in early 2012, on the territory of the Alabuga Special Economic Zone. Prior to that, at the same enterprise, Solars, in cooperation with Fiat, from 2008 to 2011 produced a light truck of the same class, the Fiat Ducato. In 2014, the Russian assembly of Ford Transit turned into a real production. The plant mastered the production of their bodies in a full cycle with welding, priming, painting and completing the interior, as well as stamping a number of basic parts, which was carried out by a new enterprise organized in the neighborhood. At the same time, the next, 8th generation Ford Transit got on the conveyor of the Russian plant. In 2015, that is, in the first full year of real Russian production of the Ford Transit, their Ford sales in Russia grew by 62% and amounted to more than 5,000. And at the end of 2021, as already mentioned, Solars Ford reached a result of about 21,000 Ford Transits. It turns out that the production of Ford Transit in Russia has quadrupled in 6 years. Moreover, it picked up pace even in 2019 and 2020, which were complicated not only by the pandemic that took over the world, but also by the transformation of Ford Solars into Solars Ford, associated with the curtailment of Ford Motors business in Russia. It's good that the winding down was not complete. Ford Transit was able not only to stay, but despite the difficult situation, to develop its success for several more years. Since 2014, the production of stamping designed for the Ford light-duty vehicle has been significantly expanded, the range of which includes all the main external and several internal body parts. In most cases, Russian steel was used in their manufacture. From these parts, in the workshops of the Solars Ford assembly plant, the bottom of the Transits is first welded, and then this bottom, figuratively speaking, begins to grow with side walls and other body elements. Robots work on welding and painting. The so-called black, that is, the welded body, is degreased, primed and painted. During dipping, a cataphotic coating 20 microns thick is applied to a special bath, which provides the metal with basic corrosion resistance. By means of a robotic line, a secondary primer is applied to the body, after which the Ford Transit is sent to the base enamel and varnish line for final painting. On the assembly line, seats, interior trim and a dashboard, which is also localized, were mounted into the cabin. Glass for small tonnage vehicles is supplied by a Russian plant. Among the components from which the Ford Transit is assembled, electrical wiring, batteries, brake pipes, exhaust system elements, front bumper, rims, tires and anti-roll bars are also localized. In total, the level of localization as of the end of 2021 reached 28%. But this is not the limit. According to the agreement concluded in 2019 with the Russian government, this level was to be gradually increased to 50%. This result was planned to be achieved mainly by expanding the stamped production of body parts and suspension parts, and most importantly, by mastering the production of diesel engines for the Ford Transit in Russia. The engine plant, which was supposed to supply Ford Transit engines manufactured in Russia, was built and equipped with all the necessary equipment, and it is also located in Alabuga next to the automobile production. This is the same engine plant that, starting from September 2015, has been mass-producing Sigma 4-cylinder gasoline engines with a working volume of 1.6 liters to equip Ford Focus, Ford Fiesta and Ford EcoSport cars localized at Ford Sollers Enterprises. In 2021 in Russia they no longer issued. The capacity of this engine plant is 105,000 engines per year. The area occupied is about 42.5 thousand square meters. Here is a very modern, that is, extremely automated production. The share of operations performed in automatic mode reaches 95%. And high automation is one of the main factors of high product quality. I note that the localization of Sigma engines produced in Alabuga was at its best. In Russia they mastered the manufacture of cylinder blocks and block heads, main bearing caps, pistons, crankshafts and spark plugs. In the course of the ongoing production of engines for transits, they plan to localize them according to approximately the same scenario, organizing the production of basic components in Russia. The equipment for this already exists, but it takes time to create the production of blanks, primarily castings, so the start of serial production of diesel engines in Alabuga was planned for 2023. By the way, at the same time they plan to update the Ford Transit itself, which is produced in Russia. Its modernized version, which has been produced in Europe for 3 years, was supposed to go into the series. The maximum gross weight of its heaviest modifications has been increased from 4.6 to 5 tons, which, by the way, made it possible to bring to the Russian market a version with an even longer wheelbase. If the production of own diesel engines for the Russian Ford Transit was just being prepared, then the production of bodies and superstructures had already been organized. The ST Alabuga enterprise, commissioned in August 2018, is engaged in it. As the name implies, it is located on the territory of the same special economic zone. This company specializes in the manufacture of manufactured goods and isothermal vans, flatbeds and bus options. Ford Transits with factory-produced bodies receive a vehicle type approval from the same manufacturer as Ford Transits that come straight off the assembly line. Therefore, they are subject to the same warranty and the same service support from dealers. That is, Sollers Ford is responsible to the consumer not only for the chassis itself, but also for the truck as a whole, along with the body mounted on its frame. And this has become one of the factors of the high popularity of Ford Transit among Russian buyers. Sollers Ford very wisely focused not on the cost of the Ford Transit itself, but on the cost of owning it, and also actively developed so-called package offers that allow the carrier to plan costs for the entire life of the Ford Transit. That is, not for 1 or 2 months, but for years to come. And a very important factor in the Russian success of the Ford Transit was its traditionally high residual value. This factor allows you to make profitable leasing offers, including operating leases, in which the residual value is very important. In addition, confidence in the high performance of the Russian Ford Transit opened up an opportunity for Sollers Ford to take advantage of such a new financial instrument for Russia as a car subscription. At its core, such a service is similar to a lease. The subscriber receives a light-duty vehicle for temporary use and, being limited only by the annual mileage, pays a certain fixed amount to the supplier every month. In this case, all costs associated with the use of the car, including its registration, transport tax and insurance, the supplier assumes, except, of course, the purchase of fuel. The project for the production of Ford Transit in Russia was very successful. Over the 10 years of the existence of the Sollers Ford joint venture, 115,000 Ford Transits have been produced at the plant in Alabuga. Impressive result. And the partners were going to achieve doubling this results twice as fast. But what happened. The divorce between Ford Motors and Sollers was final. It must be admitted that the successfully started history of Ford Transit production in Russia, unfortunately, is now over. But the Sollers enterprise in Alabuga is not closed. In place of Ford Motors, its Russian partner in the shortest possible time attracted a partner from China. This is JAC Motors. Even before the end of 2022, the first Russian-Chinese light trucks will roll off the assembly line of the former Sollers Ford plant. And not one, but 2 basic models. The first, Sollers Atlant, is almost a complete analog of the Ford Transit both in terms of layout and main characteristics. And another model was called Sollers Argo. This is a lighter truck with a cab over the engine. They are planned to be presented to potential buyers this December, so soon I will make a separate video about these light trucks.